Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. Who knows what trouble we'll get into today? I want to start with my article from yesterday. The article showed that the Clinton machine is massive and far-flung. We were talking about a number of people who work through talent agencies to groom not only athletes and musicians and such, but also politicians. And it's interesting how this machine works to connect all of these politicians to entertainers, comedians, and TV personalities, such as, well, here are some of the people we mentioned. I've actually added to the list. Here we go. Anderson Cooper is one of these people that's connected to the talent agency that's connected to the Clinton machine. Alyssa Milano, Anna Navarro, Bette Midler, Bill Maher, Twitter co-founder Isaac Biz Stone, Bob Schieffer, Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein, Martha Raddatz, Katie Tour, Jim Sciutto, Jamel Hill, David Farenthold, Stephanie Ruhle, Elizabeth Vargas, Gayle King, Ian Bremmer, Frank Luntz, Colin Jost, David Kushner, Chris Cuomo, Connie Chung, Leonard McKelvey. This is Charlemagne the God, who called out Elizabeth Warren on her possibly lying to the Texas bar about her Native American heritage. So go there, but then he's been smearing Tulsi Gabbard. And then Dan Pfeiffer, former senior advisor to President Obama, Donna Brazile, Jimmy Fallon, Joe Biden is represented by this talent agency, Valerie Jarrett, Mark Cuban, Rob Reiner, Seth MacFarlane, Stephen Colbert, Susan Rice, Van Jones, James Corden, and Whoopi Goldberg on The View. It just seems weird to me. It's not difficult to see how some of their positions make more sense now. And we're talking about the connection to the Young Turks. The Young Turks are connected to this machine. And I've got a video on this Medium article that shows the Young Turks' involvement with the powerful people connected to these talent agencies. On the client list of another talent agency, United Talent Artists. UTA anyway. Again, I'm so glad you asked who's on this list. And this is just a small part of the list. These lists are huge. But Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur are both on this list, along with other people you may have heard of. So go back and check this list. Anytime you see people who are acting in suspicious ways, this is how I see it. Anyone who is a threat to the establishment and its talented cronies will be attacked. And this whole article came from a clip by Nico House that came from another article on Medium that is upset because Tulsi Gabbard keeps getting smeared. And so they've traced it through WikiLeaks back to talent agencies where there's a lot going on. I mentioned that in yesterday's episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, so you can go back and look at it there. Now, once you know this machine's in place, you can't know everything it's doing because it's like a big, ugly iceberg, and most of it's under the surface where we can't see. But here's something that just came up, and I'm not trying to connect this dot other than just to laugh and say, well, it could be.
Debates last night, I did. Let me remember what I even have in here. Oh, so my first question is, I was watching the debate, and they introduced this guy.
I come from a state where a lot of people voted for Donald Trump.
Who the hell is that guy? I never saw that guy before. Never heard of that guy. What the F? All of a sudden, he's running for president. And by the way, he got a ton of time. Him and John Delaney seemed to be the most important people in America last night. This guy who no one knows, and that other guy no one knows, John Delaney, who really comes across as an asswipe, John Delaney. I mean, this guy came across good enough, whatever. It just seemed like they just grabbed, central casting, send me a politician. That's what it's.
And that's what it seems like to me, too. He came across okay, but who the hell is he? Steve Bullock. So if you saw yesterday's show, you might think, well, central casting just called somebody and said, we need another presidential candidate. The point of yesterday's show and in this article on Medium that I was talking about, that I wrote, the central tenet is, here's wiki proof that the Clinton machine was behind the flood of new Democratic presidential hopefuls. So they just groom them and then throw them in the fray because and this is not an outlandish thought. They want the National Convention to go to the second round because superdelegates can't vote until the second round if there's a contested election. So how better to have a contested election than to throw all of these candidates into the mix? Last time, there were only, by the end of the month of February, there were only 2 candidates. Elizabeth Warren, for some strange reason, didn't throw her hat in. And my point yesterday was it was out of deference to Hillary. And I think Biden, even though he had a better reason, probably also didn't run out of deference to Hillary. But Bernie didn't get the memo. And O'Malley was already gone by the time by the time we got to March last time. And so it was only a 2-person race. And that is not what they want this time because Hillary's not in there. So they have to figure out how to keep Bernie out. Here's somebody else, another bright, aware person talking about the Washington Post and how they seem to be treating things. And there are connections to the Washington Post from this machine that I've been talking about.
Just so happens in New Hampshire, Sanders overtakes Biden in the polls.
Dude!
That's something you won't hear them talk much about on corporate media. Senator Bernie Sanders leads the Democratic presidential field in New Hampshire with 21% in the gravest marketing poll released Tuesday. I know you're thinking, he said, well, Tim, it just came out today. Maybe they just didn't have a chance to cover it. Well, they've had a chance to cover some spin articles on him. They've had a chance to put out articles saying that Bernie sounds like Trump because he's calling out the media and their fallacies and their BS narratives. They got time to do that. But this poll, somehow, I can't see it. I don't even know it exists. Folks, if we're going to live with blinders on as if these people don't know what they're doing, as if every time they fail, we say it's overlooking, it's a mistake, then we're going to be forever with bananas in our tailpipe. Bernie Sanders is followed by former Vice President Joe Biden with 15% and Senator Elizabeth Warren at 12%. Why is it every time I hear these polls, I keep hearing how Warren's just killing it and Biden's still holding it, but I'm not hearing the other side of it when Bernie's up, quiet, on the set. When he's doing bad or if he's not winning, then we hear the talk constantly. Folks, they don't want Bernie Sanders. Did you hear any of these other candidates talk like Bernie? Come on, I'm sure I got some people who are conservative who watch this show. I know I do. Shout out to my friends. Or a couple of my friends told me their parents watch the show and they're conservative. So shout out to everybody. Look, everybody's welcome. You may not always agree with me. In fact, I know you won't always agree with me. Because that's not what this is about. This isn't about agreeing. This is about trying to find the truth. Just know this, Mom and Dad, when you watch me, you're not watching a corporation that's owned by these bigwigs. You're not watching special interest money.
Yeah.
You're watching somebody all heart.
All heart.
Tell you what they believe and what they found. And I leave it to you to make your decision. But
Preach.
back to Bernie Sanders.
Preach.
The poll stands in contrast from the most recent polls in New Hampshire compiled by Real Clear Politics,
Boo!
which showed Biden leading in the critical primary state. See, this is the thing. Which brings us to the other point of Bernie Sanders lately. Bernie Sanders has been calling out news entities that fail to report it accurately. One of those news entities that they're calling out is the Washington Post. Now, some of you might not remember because maybe you weren't watching closely last election. There was a period in time, 24 hours, where the Washington Post put out not one,
Not
5,
Not 5.
not 10, but 16 hit pieces. It was at least 16. Now, there may have been more. 16 hit pieces in 24 hours against one candidate, and that candidate was Bernie Sanders. Now, you can do...
Washington Post is owned by Josh Rogan, and he's a contractor, a war contractor, and he is always cheerleading for war. And so anytime Bernie or Tulsi gets clobbered by the Washington Post, it's Josh Rogan who's upset about their pacifist tendencies. This is the poll that Tim was talking about. Bernie Sanders, look at that. He's so out there. 21% to 15 to 12 to 11 for uncertain, 8 for Pete, 7 for Kamala, 5 for Tulsi, which puts her ahead of the bottom part of the pack, and then followed by Amy, Andrew, Tom, Julian, Beto, Kirsten, Jay, and way back is Corey. And way back is Bill de Blasio, which is great. So why is it so quiet? Why is it so quiet on the set? Now, Chris Hedges, we talked about him yesterday. At the end of the article I was quoting yesterday, or the day before, I can't remember, there's this quote: "A revolution has been unleashed across the globe. This revolution, a popular repudiation of the old order, is where we should direct all our energy and commitment. If we do not topple the corporate elites, the ecosystem will be destroyed and massive numbers of human beings along with it." So you've got this machine I've been describing, connected to Hollywood, connected to the CIA, and connected to Wall Street, connected to central banks, all of this stuff that sounds like conspiracy stuff that you may have heard in less reputable places than the Bernie or Bust show. But anyway, it's real. And Bernie is the only candidate who really systematically wants to dismantle this system. He wants to topple the corporate elites. And that's why Chris Hedges speaks well of him. But Chris doesn't speak well of the voting process. The struggle will be long. There will be times when it will seem we are going nowhere. Victory is not inevitable, but this is our best and only hope. The response of the corporate state will ultimately determine the parameters and composition of rebellion. Lest you think I'm misrepresenting him, he thinks our best and only hope is revolution, that we need to, and not violent necessarily, but we just need to, all of us, stand up continually, consistently against the corporate structure. I pray we replicate the 1989 nonviolent revolutions that overthrew the communist regimes in Eastern Europe. But this is not in my hands or yours. Go ahead and vote this November, but don't waste any more time or energy on the presidential election than it takes you to get to your polling station and pull a lever for a third-party candidate, just enough to register your obstruction and defiance, and then get back out onto the street. That is where the question of real power is being decided. And he makes a valid point. If we just elect somebody, even if it's Bernie Sanders, and then we're not out on the street, nothing's going to happen. Bernie said that. He was talking about Puerto Rico, and he showed us clips, or else I was watching someone else who was showing Bernie talking about the Puerto Rico movement, and someone else showed clips of the huge numbers of people out in the streets. Bernie needs us to be out in the streets. And whether Bernie's up in front or not, it doesn't matter. We need to be out in the streets. So let's go to Twitter. That's a way for us to get out onto the streets. I'm going to show you my Tumblr page as a way. I'm going to link to my Tumblr page so you can find this. And then it's a kind of a movement to try to get the message to the political and media elites. So not only go out in the street with your yellow vest on, but also tell the people on Twitter, here are some of the people. That's the message, but here are the people that I would tweet it at. Neera Tanden, NBC News, MSNBC, Mimi Roca, and so on. All these names are here. They're more media people than politicians, but we need to send these tweets to the politicians too. Send them anywhere you want. And the way I've got it set up here, if you tag, you can tag people now in photos, 10 people or fewer. So if there are 5 frames here, so you can send these 5 frames out on Twitter, and this is the tweet. You can send the 5th, they get out of order even if you send them in order. If you send them in reverse order, they'll come up on other people who follow you on their feeds. They'll come up in some semblance of the correct order. So start with this one, the 5th one. Tweet to these people and tag these 10 people, and then go to the 4th one and the 3rd one and the 2nd one and the 1st one. And what these frames say is, whereas those like you who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable, whereas there already exist in sufficient numbers potential voters who will stay home, vote third party, write in a candidate, or support the Republican nominee in the event that another corporatist candidate, stealthy or otherwise, is nominated by the Democratic Party superdelegates to guarantee that any establishment party nominee will lose in the general election. Whereas, see, and that's the real dynamite. We've got all these people who will stay home, vote third party, write in a candidate, or support the Republican nominee. No matter what anyone says, that's going to happen. Whereas that's a foregone conclusion. Whereas massive government mobilization in response to the climate energy is essential, that's what Chris Hedges just said, for human survival into the next millennium, and for which reason must be progressive governance, because progressives will use the government's resources to effect a healing of our climate, whereas neoliberal establishment government, think back to the last 6 or 7 sitting presidents, they're not going to do that because they are market-driven rather than we the people driven. Whereas the continued priorities and practices of neoliberalism will lead to the extinction of the human race, whereas the recent research of Thomas Piketty and documentary film producer Jeff Cohen and his contributors, that's a great, I've seen the trailer of it, and I talked about that film in an earlier segment. Can't remember it, but I'll put it back under the video so you can find it. This documentary, it's about NAFTA and the effects of NAFTA in swing states. Whereas only one candidate for president has an army of volunteers already in place that will help to register and mobilize the voters that Piketty outlines. Whereas there are only 2 candidates for president with the ability to fill stadiums, at least right now, Senator Sanders and President Trump. And Senator Sanders is better at it. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the teeming masses who are in agreement, we demand a populist agenda, including fundamental change in government campaign finance. We demand a climate policy that bans fracking, new oil extraction, and ends subsidies to oil companies. We demand a rapid transition to clean energy sources. We demand clean air, clean water, and healthy food. We demand Medicare for all. We demand an end to regime change wars and American imperialism. And we demand an end to corporate welfare. So, Elizabeth Warren, who has a plan, That's different. That's incrementalism. That's not actually fixing this shit. We have to fix it. We demand fiscal policies that will distribute the wealth back to the workers of this vastly wealthy country. We demand a government that answers directly to its people rather than to transnational corporations, to Wall Street executives, to CEOs, and to hedge fund managers. We demand of all elected officials, elitist or otherwise, that corporate trade agreements such as NAFTA must be repealed. TPP must be repealed. All the other versions of TPP must be repealed. We demand that progressive candidates for higher office, such as Senator Bernie Sanders, who works on behalf of we the people, be treated honestly and fairly by opinion leaders and by the media. It's what the talent agencies do. They groom thought leaders. So these thought leaders, we're sending you a message. We resolve to hold you, especially the entertainment, political, and media elites, responsible in public forums, articles, blogs, and in other literature that is free of corporate influence. So we're also going to use platforms that are not free. For example, Twitter, definitely not free of corporate influence. Facebook, definitely not free. YouTube, definitely not free of corporate influence. But we're going to do what we can to get the word out, and we're going to call attention to your complicity in damaging the only aspiring candidate currently positioned to defeat a sitting president running for re-election during good, at least it's good for the 1%, economic times. So Tim Black, this is the answer. We need to hold these elites accountable. We resolve to use our resources, including a political action committee, persuasion, and the power of a progressive movement to sabotage any superdelegate chosen neoliberal, stealthy like Elizabeth Warren or not, nominee of the Democratic Party in the general election against Donald Trump. You have been warned. So that's what's going on. You can do that on Twitter. You could also just share this link on Facebook. This Tumblr. This is a Tumblr post. Alrighty, that's all I got for today. Bernie or bust. We shit you not.